this song for ya.
You're listening to Deep Purple Smoke on the Podcast. I will do one episode for each song the band recorded in the studio. However, this is a fan podcast and not band endorsed. It's more of a tribute to their long history, well beyond just the hits, and my way of giving something back to a band that has given so much to me. Let's dig in! Hello and welcome to another episode of Deep Purple Smoke on the Podcast. I am your host, Scott Haskin, bringing you every single song Deep Purple ever recorded in the studio that I know of. And as far as I know, everything that's been put out there in one form or another, I have found. If I pass through an album that I missed a bonus track on or something like that, please let me know. I may have misidentified what album the track belongs to when it was recorded, or I just might not know about it. It's very possible. I've never claimed to be an expert. I just claim to love the music that this band has created for a good majority of my life. And arguably, they are the band that I've listened to more than any other band as far as the time I've spent listening to music. While I've learned from a lot of different bands and artists, I would have to say right along those lines, and it makes perfect sense, I've probably learned more from Deep Purple and its collective members than any other band that's out there. But look at what these members have gone on to do. You know, Rainbow, Whitesnake, Gillan, Butterfly Ball, you name it. They've been involved in so many amazing projects. But today, we are talking about the second track on the second side of Deep Purple in Rock. Is it called Deep Purple in Rock or is it in Rock? This is a question. I remember they talked about this. Nate and John talked about this on the Deep Purple podcast, and I haven't had time to go back and re-listen to that episode. I just can't recall off the top of my head what the conclusion was, but here's the thing. I'm looking at the album cover and it says Deep Purple underneath of it in Rock. Same font. Looks like it could be one title. So it also looks like it could be the band name and then underneath of that, the album title. So I thought, you know what, let me look at the vinyl. That'll tell me, right? Wrong, because it says the exact same thing. There's no spatial difference between the words Deep Purple and the words in Rock. It looks like, again, it could be the band name and the album title, or it really looks more like it could be one thing. Deep Purple in Rock is the name of the album. And it makes sense if you look at the album cover, you're looking at the 5 members of Deep Purple in a reconstructed version of South Dakota's Mount Rushmore, where they have replaced the 4 presidents with their 5 heads. And so Deep Purple in Rock, literal translation, makes perfect sense. So I thought, you know what? I will check Discogs. Discogs knows everything, right? Well, maybe, maybe not. And Discogs actually has it just listed as in Rock, not Deep Purple in Rock. The band category is Deep Purple, and then the title of the album is in Rock. So I don't know what's right. And really, at the end of the day, does it really matter? No, it really doesn't. It's just a thing of curiosity, a little bit of a conversation piece. But the most important thing, of course, is the music on this album. It's hard to imagine sometimes for me that this album only has 7 songs on it, because it is such a major influence, such a powerful point in rock history, that to think it just has a mere 7 songs is so strange in a way. And you think about music now, and bands are releasing albums with, 12 to 16 songs, sometimes more than that. And it's almost like an album isn't a full album unless the tracks go to double digits. But back in the 70s, the 60s, you couldn't do that unless your songs were really short. And Deep Purple didn't really seem to care about that. They were going to write the songs the way the songs needed to be written and figure out how it's going to work on the album. And they did. So today we're talking about the second track after Friday's track, Flight of the Rat. We're talking about Into the Fire. The liner notes, kind of cheeky, just say out of the frying pan. And that is a common phrase. You get out of the frying pan, and because it's a horrible place to be, but you've actually gone someplace worse. Now you're directly in the fire. And I get that as a metaphor. Kind of cool. Again, don't necessarily know how that relates to the song lyrics. I feel like I'm going to say that a lot with these guys. Sometimes it's just a great story. and I don't necessarily need to know what's behind it to be able to enjoy the song. Again, not being a big lyrics guy, I appreciate the voice more as an instrument than I do specifically what it's saying. It's more like, how does it make me feel? Like, how does a guitar make me feel when the guitarist is playing the solo? How does the vocalist make me feel when they're singing the vocals? That's kind of my take on it. But there are, especially with Ian Gillan and Roger Glover being the lyric writers, it's hard not to focus on some lines here and there and go, that's pretty funny, or that's pretty cheeky, or whatever. So we'll see how that goes as we get through the songs. But for now, we're going to get into it. But first, happy Monday, you guys. I hope that your week is off to a great start. I'm actually recording this on a Sunday afternoon as the sun is going down here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Had clear skies today. It's been overcast the last couple of days, which has been fantastic because I love listening to music when it's overcast. And I want to thank the patrons of this show. We have two of them. Corey Morissette from his multitude of podcasts in the CMPU or Corey Morissette podcast universe, and the podcast Will Rock. The Power of Positive Geeking, Ultimate Catalog Clash are the current shows. There are some new up and coming. They may be out by the time this airs. Hopefully that'll be the case, because Rock Court is one I'm really looking forward to. And there's another one he's doing on a, not a rewatch podcast, but a first watch podcast. And I'm not sure what the status of that is currently, but I know that if Corey has anything to do with it, it will be fantastic. So thank you, Corey, for being a patron of the show. Also, my good friend, William Rose, super cool guy, really big fan of music, obviously great music. It was a supporter of Uriah Heep, the Magicians podcast. He's followed me here to Deep Purple Smoke on the podcast. You hear his name mentioned on all the episodes of the Deep Purple podcast, as he's a fan of theirs as well. William, thank you so much for your support. I can't tell you guys how much it means to me. And I said this, every week on the Magicians podcast. When you put something out there into the world for public consumption, you hope that people will like what you're doing. You hope that you affect them in some way, whether it be energizing them or inspiring them or just giving them something to smile at, whatever it is, however it affects them, that's great. And I remember people writing to me on the Magicians podcast where, some people would listen to it in the morning on their commute to work. Some people would listen to it while they were out for their morning walk or jog, or, taking their dog out for a walk. All these different things that people would do with the podcast in a way to double up on their time to do whatever the thing was that they were going to do, but also take the time to enjoy the show. And when you find out that the thing that you're putting out there in the world is something that people enjoy, that's the greatest thing. Music has become fairly dead as far as that goes. If you're not a touring artist and you're not somebody big, and I don't mean physically, I mean just like popular, have like a huge following or whatever, it's a pretty desolate world. It's very rare that you find out people are even listening to your music. I mean, you can look at stats, but it doesn't mean anything. It could be that people just found you on Spotify and said, oh, what's this? Okay, not for me, and switched it off after 5 or 10 seconds. You really don't know. And it's pretty rare these days in music that an independent artist really even has any idea that anyone cares about what they're doing. So when I started doing podcasts and I was getting a lot more direct feedback on the shows and people saying, hey, I really like this episode, or I really like your interview approach, or I really like this or that. It definitely made it more inspiring to do the podcast, not because I need the validation, because I'm going to do what I want to do as far as what I want to create regardless. This show is fairly new. I haven't received a lot of feedback yet. And I'm recording this also like a month plus in advance. So, I may have had more feedback by now, hopefully, but mainly I just want to know that people are enjoying what I'm putting out there. That's the main thing. So for those of you guys who have supported the show, thank you very much. Corey and William, you guys are awesome. If you guys want to sign up for the Patreon, you can just go right to the show notes. The link is right there. It'll take you right to the page. It's free to sign up for a Patreon account if you want to throw some money the show's ways. There is a couple of tiers. If you want to throw in a different amount than what I've created and you're unable to create a tier yourself, shoot me an email. Let me know. I'd be happy to help you with that. Yeah, why wouldn't I? So let's get into today's song. This song, it's weird. You think about a rock band and you think about Richie's statement is if it's not exciting or dramatic, it doesn't belong on this album. But what does that really mean? Excitement, you think big flourishing guitar and organ solos with Deep Purple. You think really big killer drum fills like we got in Flight of the Rat or Speed King. You think just big, huge sound, pounding bass from Roger Glover, big screams from Ian Gillan. That might be what comes to mind. But what does it mean when you talk about dramatic? Does it have to be a fast tempo to be exciting and dramatic? I don't think so. One of my favorite rock songs, love this song to this day, and I find it so amazing how solid this recording is on Ian Gillan's album Glory Road, and the last track, Nervous. It's a very slow and patient song, but when those notes are hit, those notes are incredibly powerful, and the space in between them makes them even more powerful. It's a slow tempo, really gritty vocal, and that reminds me a little bit of this song. This is a slightly more moderate tempo than Nervous, but it has that same patience to it, that same we're going to draw this out and make this more feeling than, if we would play this at double the tempo or whatever, which they could do, but it would be a completely different song, obviously, as any song would when you change the tempo. Even changing a song 5 BPM or beats per minute, which is the speed that the song is played, can have a dramatic impact on it. But this one is just patient and gritty, and we're going to get into all things. Here it is, Deep Purple doing Into the Fire, played right about 1/4 as much as their most played live song, according to Setlist FM. This has been played 550 times live. Here it is. I mean, it just sounds so heavy. Love it. You got John Lord Pan slightly to the left, Richie Pan slightly to the right. This would be the way that they would play on stage for most of the setups. Every once in a while, you see some strange setup when they were on like Top of the Pops or something, and the drums are out in front and Richie's in the back somewhere, and it's just kind of crazy on stage. But for the most part, this is where they would be seated. Now, Roger's bass is a little more, sounds more towards the center to me. So that's interesting because he would be more between Ian Gillan and John Lord on stage. But I don't know how they were always set up, but that's where things sit in the mix as far as the recording goes. But everything sits really nicely because you can hear it all. And you get a nice pop of the snare. The only thing that's a little bit muddy, I would say, is the bass drum, but you get the punch of it. But a punchier bass drum would have cut through this mix a little bit better just because it's so low end heavy. Roger's bass is just huge sounding though. I absolutely love it. And then this is one of my favorite guitar tones from Richie is on this album. And and honestly, Straight Between the Eyes, I've always loved his sound on Straight Between the Eyes. Possibly a little bit of nostalgic value there as well, because that was really the album that started me on this whole journey. And so there might be a little bit of nostalgia to it. Also, it's like one of the first guitar tones I really paid attention to. So there may be a little bit of that involved, a little bit of bias. But in any case, I do love the way it sounds. And here, his guitar just sounds absolutely humongous. Doesn't it feel like Ian Gillan is just clenching all of his muscles and putting every fiber of his being into this vocal? So gritty, so powerful and raw, and I absolutely love this kind of singing. It really makes you feel the passion in him telling this story more than I think anything else could do. Screams don't give you that. And it's this kind of vocal control that I think really makes this album part of what really makes this album as intense as it is. I mean, I think he's matching Richie's distorted guitar very, very well here as far as that kind of grit and intensity go. And I'm definitely here for it. You know, it's interesting, something about this album that I just realized when you think back on some of the songs that we listened to in Mark 1, and you think about Richie's playing nowadays, or even, you know, through his last couple of years in Deep Purple, he's throwing in all these little flourishes, all these, like he's doing an extra track where there's all this extra stuff going on, and it makes the song interesting beyond the riff, and that's cool. And what I'm noticing is he's not really doing that on this album, and I've never specifically noticed that before. Now, I don't think the album's suffering for not having that. I don't know that it would have been better if it did have that, but it's certainly a difference in the style that we get in the presentation of the music. Now, that leaves the one person who is making each passage of this riff a little bit different being Ian Paice, because he's not playing the same fill at the end of every pass of the riff. He's doing something different. So he's the one that's kind of, you know, keeping it interesting instead of just going, oh, okay, here's the riff again. Let's listen to that. Okay, great. Now let's get into the verse. Instead, it's like, what's Ian going to do on the next one? And that often, a lot of times that falls on the drummer. So this is not uncommon, but it just, all of a sudden I'm like, wow, where are those extra notes? Where are the things that I've gotten so used to hearing? And why have I never noticed that it wasn't there before? Now, I love the multiple vocal tracks here, and I love, again, that they're not together. You know, it would be easy enough to just go and record something and then double it on another track, or, you know, bounce that to a second track and put an effect on it, whatever studio trickery you want to use. But I love that he recorded it, that he did something different on each of those tracks. Some parts are together where they're meant to be, and other parts are not. And I love that. I think it adds such an interesting dynamic to the presentation of the song. And also, I could argue further that it makes that intensity even deeper, you know. So there's that. But I was just looking at the lyrics because I was trying to recall, there's a little bit of a question mark here for me. The line just says, gonna make it rough for you. Gonna get a message through, you know, but is the gonna make it rough for you, is that I'm gonna make it rough for you, the choice you're making is gonna make it rough for you? I think it's going to the choices that you're making, because that's kind of where we started off in the beginning of the song, was talking about choices. And I'm gonna say that's what it is. I think Ian is kind of a bystander in this song, and not interacting. He's just kind of being observational and telling this person, here's what's going on in your life that you may not be seeing. So, but the delivery, again, you know, regardless of the meaning, the delivery of these vocals is just amazing. I think it would have been incredibly interesting to have had this song in Mark 1 and see what Rod Evans would have done with these vocals. Had he written these words, have been presented with these words to this music, I really wonder how he would have sang that, because I know he had the ability to put some grit in his voice. We get that in songs like Kentucky Woman, but is that something that would have been sustainable? Would he have approached this with a completely different feeling? Obviously would have a big impact on the overall feel of the song. So it would have been interesting to hear, you know, especially this one. I think Flight of the Rat, he could have done fine. You know, it would have been a different sound, but I think he would have done fine with that. But a song like this, where you really need to almost reach inside your own stomach to get this sound, I wonder how that would have worked out. Be interesting anyway. Don't AI generate that. That was a really cool drum fill there. It played and then it left a little bit of space and then continued. That was interesting. I'm going to go back and play that again for you guys. Yeah, that's interesting because it had that, pause and then it continued and then it has a pause and then came back on time. And I think that's the key to being a good drummer is regardless of what situation you put yourself in when you're in a drum fill, you have an idea, you don't play it right. And I don't know that that was the case here. That may be exactly what he intended. But as long as you always come back on the beat, you can do whatever you want in the fill. You can mess up the fill and still recover as long as you come back on that beat. And it's a kind of a weird pause after that last hit before the beat starts. And I almost feel like I don't know how you would plan that. Certainly possible, certainly something he could have done, but it feels more like he just got off the track, but came right back in exactly where he should. And that's how you recover from a drum fill. Ian Paice seems to have this internal metronome. And think again, like, guys, this was not recorded to a click track. This is musicians having to be good and know the tempo and be able to feel it and play together and be on time together. And if you've got a drummer that knows where that one is all the time, you can do things like paint yourself into a corner with a drum fill. You can, as long as the fill winds up sounding good, and I think it does. I think it's actually a really cool fill. I don't know that it was planned. I don't know how far ahead he thinks about what he's going to play. I don't even really know how well I did that. You kind of get an inclination of what you want to do shortly before the fill comes up, because you have to start somewhere. Your arms just don't flail willy-nilly and come out with a great fill. But it's kind of a weird thing because you're focusing on what you're doing. You're making sure that you're staying on time, that you're leading into the beginning of the fill properly, lifting the hi-hat a little bit where you need to lead it in. But how much of what I'm going to do is conscious? I don't know, because I'm too busy focusing on the moment. So I don't really know how much I think ahead. I don't know. I've never heard Ian Paice talk about in an interview what his process is for that at all. It would be interesting to find out. But, being inside the musician, you may not know either. It's just something that you do. And the longer you do it, it just becomes such an instinctive thing that a lot of things you don't think about, you just do them. Think about, if you're not a musician, think about a job that you've had for a long period of time, maybe certain processes that you run, or even just how you structure your day. At first, you might have it all written down, you might schedule it, and then once you perfect it, and then you do it day after day after day after day for some period of time, whether that be a month, 6 months, a year, you get into a routine and you just do without consciously thinking. So there may be a subconscious element to it. There may still be a conscious element to it. Even being a drummer myself, I'm not sure I know. Either way, it's a damn cool fill. Now, there's a good chance you were focused on Richie's solo there, as well you should. It's a nice solo. I love the feel of it. Really plays well with the song, not flashy, not overplaying, nothing like that. Really just perfect for this piece of music. But every once in a while, I have to go and see what Roger Glover is up to. And I love what he's playing here because the idea I've always had in my head was that bass is the low notes, right? You're keeping the rhythm, you're touching on the melody, but you're kind of that go-between instrument. Roger is a lot more melodic of a bass player than that. And if you listen to what he's playing, he's not playing doon, 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 doon. He's playing doon, 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 doon. playing up into more the melodic range of it and giving the bass a much broader dynamic range than I think most bass players would do. And that's really magical to me because he really sees opportunity in his role to enhance the sound of the song much better than just playing root notes. Like I would do if, when I would write bass a lot of times. And he's one of the reasons I don't do that so much anymore. But I used to be like, okay, so here's the root note of the chord. That's what the bass should be playing. No, it should be playing what the bass should be playing. And Roger's melodic style, it's the reason that I love his playing so much is because he really does think on a different level than I do as a bass player. I really wish I could do that all the time, that I could find those notes that are just right. Because to me, as a composer, because I'm so programmed and working out of that, but I've been so programmed that I just hear doon, dun, doon, dun, just repeat that. Bass is there to just hold that sound down, keep that foundation, but it can do so much more than that. And I thank Roger for really opening my eyes to what a bass guitar can really do for a song. By the way, finger popping, as far as I've been able to figure out, is snapping your fingers. And, I forgot all about that. I used to do that all the time as a kid. I would snap my fingers to a beat, when listening to music or just getting something in my head. And at some point, and I don't know where this happened in my life, but at some point I just stopped doing it and forgot all about it. So thanks for the reminder, Ian. But yeah, great lyric. I love that he didn't get incredibly crazy at the end of this. There's really no chorus vocally. There's just the riff and what really feels more like a pre-chorus. But I love that it doesn't feel repetitive, even though we're not getting really any variety in the riffs. They're not playing them differently. They're not doing different harmonies or anything like that. Other than the drums being different, it's really a fairly straightforward presentation, but they're so short. The parts are so short that they really don't feel repetitive to me. They're intricate within that short time span, but they feel good. They're nice and patient. They've got a nice even tempo to them, very well performed. And it just sounds so gritty. How can you not love it? Yes, there we have Ian Paice once again telling everyone the song is over. Stop playing. We're done. Love that. They really killed again the reverb on this. The song just like feels like it's going to carry out a little bit, but it just dies. And again, that might have been time constraints on the album that they only had so much room. So they got 4 songs on this side. One of them is like 7.5 minutes long. So again, real estate, very vital in the decision-making process. May or may not have been the case. I'm just speculating on that because I don't know. But yeah, I again, that typical, let's slow down, but build it up at the same time. I love the contrast of that. Very powerful ending, little flourish from Ritchie. Feels like a live stage ending would have gone. Very, very cool. I have heard a little bit of this live, and I will say it's performed very well. The tough thing about doing a song like this live, and going back to my whole tie-in with why I don't listen to live albums, being the tempos have to make sense to me. And when you're there and you're playing in front of a crowd or you're in the crowd, You've got the energy. It's going to put more momentum into everything you're doing. So it makes it very challenging to do a song like this and keep the tempo where it needs to be, because the tendency would be you're in front of a live crowd, you're excited, this song's a lot of fun to play, I'm having a good time. You would just naturally play at a faster tempo or increase at some point during the song. But the versions that I've heard of this, as I recall, there was none of that. They were right on. And to me, again, the sign of a solid drummer who can hold down that fort and make sure that the tempo doesn't get out of control, because that would be the natural tendency. So check out any live versions that you might hear. I think they're worth listening to, but killer song. What I love, I think, most about this song that I haven't mentioned already is just the fact that you can have, well, I guess I kind of did touch on it a little bit, but that you can have an album that's very exciting, very dramatic, but still have a song that doesn't have to just pound the tempo. It doesn't have to be flashy solos and just, digga, 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 digga through the whole thing. This is the dramatic side of it. And to hold down such a tempo, to put so much grit into it, I think this is a really magical track and really shows the possibility of what a band can do when they just sit down and write a good song for the sake of the song, and not because this has to be a hard driving song. And I think it sits very well on the album as far as the order of the songs go. I'm going to argue, I think that the next song, when we get to Live in Wreck, could have been a good album opener for the American version of the album that didn't have that longer Speed King opening. But I think, for the band to show, okay, so we've done a lot of psychedelic stuff. We've done some pop, we've done some rock, we played with an orchestra. We need to define our new sound. So to start with, even the American version of Speed King, that's just that snare and everyone just comes in on fire. I think that was a fine opening. I would say Live in Wreck could have been a good opening as well, or maybe an opening to side B. So I could have gone with another arrangement, but I think the arrangement that they have on this works honestly just fine. Part of that, again, might be the nostalgia factor, because I've been listening to this album for, 40 years as it is this way. So to me, these songs just make sense in that order. But if I try my best to step out of that and put a producer hat on and go, what really works here? Does it work because I'm used to it, or does it work because it works? I think I probably would do this. I would have kept side A the same. And then I would have switched Flight of the Rat with Live in Wreck, and would have come in with Live in Wreck and then Into the Fire and then Flight of the Rat. And then you have to end with Hard Lovin' Man. That's just too perfect of an album ender to move that one. So I might have done that differently. But again, you know what? Sometimes these decisions, guys, are made literally with the snap of a finger. I mean, the record company could say, hey, guys, we got to decide an album cover. Okay, let's do this. All right, done. And move on. They might have looked at this over the course of a couple of weeks while they were, mixing and mastering the album, and really worked on the order specifically for whatever reasons or justifications they had for doing that. Or it could have been, you know what, we don't care. We wrote the songs. We put the songs together. You guys figure out how it's going to work on the album. That's not our problem. And the record company might have decided it. I have no idea. What I do know is that we do get a great representation of tracks on this album. I think it's fine the way it is, but I would be curious to switch that maybe on a playlist and give it a run through and see if that might work a little bit better for me. But obviously I'm very happy with what we got. So that is our show for today. Great song. I hope that you listened to that music. And I would say, now that you've listened to the podcast, go back and listen to the song by itself and see how it makes you feel with all these new thoughts in your head. Or maybe they're ones you've had already. Maybe you've already thought about how cool it is, how gritty the song is, and these, second vocal tracks and all that stuff. Maybe these are thoughts you've already had. But go back and listen to the song in full. I always think that after a podcast and after you have, new information, or maybe just being reminded of something that you've thought about before, always a good idea to revisit the song after that. So I would encourage you to go listen to Into the Fire and then listen to the rest of the album, because it's just that damn good. We'll see you tomorrow, guys. Cheers. for listening to Deep Purple Smoke on the Podcast, a tour of the entire Deep Purple studio recordings. Please remember to give the show a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. Leave a comment and tell your friends. I also have a Patreon set up if you'd like to support the show. You can also write to me at smokeonthepodcast@gmail.com. I hope you enjoyed the episode and thanks for listening.